I saw something I can't explain in a South Carolina marsh, Part 2, written by I Am Raiden. I'd like to thank everyone in the last thread for the advice I got in my last post. Some of those comments really helped me understand what I'm dealing with, so thanks for that. As for the rest of the story, I did my best to recall all that I could. Keep in mind that this is coming from when I was 10. Figured it was best I never went back out into the marsh, at least not out on the water, but lo and behold, the next day I found myself going out there again. To this day, I'm not sure if I should regret that decision. However, I wasn't planning to explore the marsh with just mere fishing equipment. This time I was prepared. I brought my father's pocket knife with me in case things got bad, along with a lunch and a life vest, per my mother's request. I don't know what answers I was expecting to get out there. I suppose I went out there solely to confirm their existence. I got to the clearing at around 10 a.m. and waited. And waited. And waited. Nothing. Had I gone insane? Had my mother been right? Did sitting that close to the TV really mess with my head? I figured there was only one more thing to do. I put my oar in the water, within reaching distance, obviously, and waited for something to happen. Didn't take long for the hand to react. I didn't know whether to be scared or happy when I saw that pale form come out of the water. After retrieving my oar, I stared at the hand, waiting for it to do something, but nothing happened. It rested limply on the surface. I could vaguely make out a wrist that descended into the murky depths, but nothing more. I lightly squeezed my pocket, reassuring myself that my father's knife was ready to be drawn at a moment's notice. Deciding I had nothing to lose, I waved at the hand. The hand instantly waved at me. I was taken back. I didn't really expect it to be able to understand me, but it made sense that it could, given the gestures it had given me the day before. At that point, my curiosity had been spiked beyond the point of no return. I began to experiment by making a variety of hand gestures, starting with pointing, which I assume it understood because it always seemed to turn in the general direction I was pointing. As time went on, I realized it knew a lot more than just pointing. If I recall correctly, it knew both thumbs up and thumbs down, wait, no, and obviously it knew how to wave. Being 10, I decided to try something I learned before moving to South Carolina. I promptly stuck my middle finger up at the hand. It hesitated for a moment, and then quickly mimicked my hand, flipping me off. Needless to say, my 10-year-old self found it hilarious. I burst into laughter. I'd never done that to another person before, and having it done to me was silly at the time. The hand continued to flash me the bird throughout the day, along with several other gestures, but I think the middle finger was its favorite. For every time it did it, I erupted into a fit of giggles. If hands could show facial expressions, I'd be willing to bet that hand was smiling. As the sun reached its peak that day, I began to want answers to questions from the night before. I began to clap with both my hands to see what the lone swamp hand would do. Much to my surprise, another hand instantly shot out of the water and began to clap with the first hand. If this wasn't in the middle of the swamp, it would have looked almost normal, like someone was clapping their hands above their heads. I raised my right arm above my head, as if I was asking a question to see what the hand would do. Slowly, the hand raised itself above the water, making its way to my hand's height. The hand stretched higher and higher, revealing that under the wrist was an extremely long forearm, longer than any human arm I've seen. If somehow this massive forearm was connected to an elbow, I never saw it. As soon as the first forearm reached my hand in height, the second one began its ascent. Curious, I carefully stood up and extended my arms to their maximum height. At the time I was around 5'2", and my raised arms probably extend that to someone around 6'2". The hands stayed at their original height for a brief moment, and then slowly began to ascend again to my height. At this point they were both well beyond the conceivable notion of how long a human forearm can be, and something tells me that they were much longer under the surface. But I didn't dawdle on that for too long, because the moment they reached my height, they both simultaneously flipped me off, and I burst into laughter. I laughed so hard that I forgot I was on a boat for one moment, and in that moment, I forgot about balance, and I got to feel how cold the marsh water was for the first time. When I fell into the water, I might as well have been blind. The thick water clouded my eyes. Even though the life vest prevented me from sinking, I still struggled to keep my head above the water. Suddenly, I felt a sudden push on the back of my calf, followed by one near my shoulder, and then my tailbone, my right thigh, my hips. Slowly I was raised out of the water on my back by what must have been 20 hands. As they hoisted me into the air, I saw about 5 other hands simultaneously emptying out my overturned rowboat. I watched in awe as they all worked together without any form of communication. The strangest part about it, well, besides the fact that there were about 25 extremely long arms supporting me in the air, was that I wasn't scared. I knew exactly what these hands were doing, helping me. The whole event, from falling in the water to the hands hoisting me out, took no time at all. I was back in my boat within a minute. After they lowered me into my drained rowboat, 24 of the hands sank back down into the water. However, one hand remained above water. It appeared to be clenching something. As the hand drew closer, I realized it was holding my father's knife. I carefully took the knife from the lone hand, expecting it to be mad at me. Fortunately for me, it didn't seem to care. After I tucked the knife back into my pocket, the lone hand waved at me. It took me a moment to realize it was waving goodbye. We waved at each other for a moment, and then the final hand sunk back down into the murky water. I returned home shortly after. I'd quenched my thirst for the answers that day. Even though it was midday, I found myself laying in my bed. I answered most of my questions, but a cloud of uncertainty still loomed above my head. Clearly I was dealing with something strange, but as far as I was aware, they had no intentions to hurt me. They seemed as curious about me as I was about them. Every day for the rest of that summer, I found myself back out on that river trying to communicate with the hands. While the only encounters I remember clearly are the first 2, I can say that the rest of the encounters I had with them were more or less the same as the second one. The hands and I would generally exchange gestures for the majority of the time. A lot of time was spent of me trying to teach them ASL with a book I got from the local library. But I stopped after a while because I had no idea if the hands understood the concept of words. Every time I asked them if they understood what I was saying, they would respond with a thumbs up. But when I tried to sign them something, they would just respond with another thumbs up. As for more spectacular events like when multiple hands emptied my boat, I only remember one. Basically, I wanted to see what would happen if I tried to walk on water with them there. I thought they would lay out their palms and I'd be able to walk on them like a platform, but they just immediately shot out of the water and lifted me back onto the boat. Either they didn't understand my intentions, or they didn't want me in the water. I try not to think about it too much. As summer came to an end, I visited the hands less and less. I think I lost that sense of wonder that came from visiting them. As the school year began, I only visited the hands once a week. Sometimes less than that because they no longer became the focus of my life. Bobby Duke took their spot. Bobby Duke was a shithead, to say it the least. He was the reason my first year of school in South Carolina was a living hell. I went to school every day with the threat of him mocking me in front of everyone. My father didn't seem to care, and my mother followed the same mindset for whatever reason. As time passed, the punches grew stale. It became a routine for me to want to run away. Occasionally, I think about the hands and how they didn't have to worry about anything. They could do whatever they wanted. They didn't have to fear anyone named Bobby Duke. But I only thought about happy things like that every once in a while. The time in between was filled with silent dinners and crying in the school bathroom. One week, sometime in spring, Bobby Duke approached me saying that he'd be leaving on a fishing trip for that weekend and that he wouldn't be in school all next week. For a moment, I felt free, but that was only for a moment, as the next thing he did was something much worse than anything he'd done before. Guess I'll have to combine the next 2 weeks into one, he spat out, and then he punched me in the face. Don't even think he was ready for it. His face showed regret for a second, but then he was back to being Bobby Duke, and I was left alone. Sorry for the sudden change in tone. I just wanted people to understand how I felt when I heard about the accident. To put it shortly, Bobby's boat overturned on the high seas midway through his fishing trip. It was deemed an accident, a freak act of nature, something that could have happened to anybody. Bobby's father said they might have hit a reef, that suddenly they were hit by something massive from below. Bobby was the only one who died. He didn't know how to swim. Normally this wouldn't be odd, but what made it strange was that he had a life vest on. He should have floated. An investigation was launched to find his body. His parents needed closure. The Coast Guard never found his body. Nature did that for them. He washed up on shore 5 days after the accident. They assumed the current must have pulled him under, but that was too hard to accept, considering the cause of death wasn't drowning. It was strangulation. I visited the hands the next day. I tried to ask them if they did it. They just gave me a thumbs up. I think they were trying to protect me. They waited for him to be out on the open water. I think that's what happened. The reason I'm posting this story now is because it happened again, 3 weeks ago. My ex-girlfriend slapped me after I said we should be seeing other people. 3 days later, she fell off the edge of Cherry Grove Pier. Cause of death was strangulation. They want to protect me then. It's been 19 years since I've seen the hands, and they remembered me. They still want to protect me. However, it's not all bad. There's someone at work who's been giving me a rough time despite my loss. I think I'll be getting into a fight with him.